Welcome to Jones Blair Paint, a case for data-driven decision making. Welcome to part 2. Just as a quick reminder, in part 1, we talked a little bit about Jones Blair and the paint industry, and we had this dilemma of figuring out who are the best segments, both customers and location. Now we're ready to start deep diving into some data that will help us determine a little bit more about the locations. On page 3 of the PDF file, we can start looking at what's been going on in the paint industry in those regions of the 50 counties as far as the number of stores and outlets, and then we get a sense of the pattern. So if you look at 1975 in the urban area, this is DFW, there were 600 paint store outlets industry-wide. Also in 1975 in the rural counties, that's the other 48 counties that Jones Blair had a presence in, there were also 600 stores for a total of 1,200. Now let's go look at what happened 11 years later in 1986. We find that in the urban location, they have 300 stores now, and in the rural, they have 700 for a total of 1,000. Now, specifically for Jones Blair, by 1986, Jones Blair had 80 stores in the urban area and 120 stores in the rural area, for a total of 200. So what does that tell us? As of 1986, the urban outlets have dropped in half. Well, why do you suppose that happened? Most likely from consolidations, like smaller stores consolidating into larger stores. The rural outlets have moved up by 100 outlets. So if you do a percentage of increase, that's 100 divided by 600, giving us 16.67%. Total outlets have dropped by 200 stores, or they're down by 16.67%. Now JB, or Jones Blair, had 200 outlets themselves, 20% of the total industry outlets. 17% of the rural outlets and 40% of the JB outlets are urban. 26% of urban outlets and 60% of Jones Blair outlets are rural. That starts to give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the industry and with Jones Blair in the urban setting and the rural setting. Looking at these figures so far, urban versus rural, which one looks like a better market to tap into? Now let's take a look at the Exhibit 1 chart in your PDF file, specifically at the year 1986. So for the paint industry in those 50 counties, the total sales revenue, or total dollars sales, was $55 million. Now out of that, in the DFW area, there was 33 million in sales, and in the rural, there was 22 million in sales. Here's a really good insider tip. Whenever you have numbers, turn them into a table. Whenever you have a table, turn it into a chart. That gives you a much more visual way to view the numbers and see what's really happening, to capture that exciting story from the data. As we convert the numbers into a table and then the table into a chart, notice how in this view we can really see in the urban area sales are pretty much flat, consistent, not going anywhere. Even though there's more sales revenue, it's still flat. In the rural area, we can see that there is definitely some growth going on. Smaller number, yes, but there is growth. What can that tell us? Okay, hold on to your hats because we're about to go on a wild ride here with some numbers. This is going to be the really fun part, but your head's going to be swimming, so hang on. In this next view, so let's see what the numbers are going to tell us now. Looking at the total column first, the DFW, or the urban area, had 60% of the 55 million. That gives us 33 million. And then that leaves 22 million in the rural market. Now let's fill in the columns. The urban DIYs had 70% of the volume that we learned from our reading at the bottom of page 3. So 70% of the 33 million is 23.1 million. That leaves us then in the urban professional painter, who had 30% of the 33 million, or 9.9 million in revenue. Okay, looking at the rural DIYers, they purchased 90%, according to our reading, of $22 million, and that is 19.8 million. The rural professional painters now only purchased or accounted for 10% of the revenue of 22 million. That is essentially 2.2 million. Now that we look at those numbers, have you got a sense yet of which one of those 4 segment categories might be a good potential segment to target for the increased sales and promotion? Oh, but we're not done yet. We're just getting warmed up. In this particular exhibit number 2 from your reading, this gives us a sense of what Jones Blair has been doing within their 50-county region. In other words, their portion of the entire sales. So again, let's look at 1986. We have total gallons of paint being sold as 594,412 gallons of paint, and their total sales volume, or sales revenue in this case, is 4.67 million. Since Jones Blair needs to make some decisions about which segment to look at, we need to do a breakdown for what their sales revenue looks like. So here we go. Exhibit 3 shows us that the sales revenue between the urban and the rural were basically split in half of the total volume of 4.67 million for Jones Blair. Let's see if we can determine the market share percentages and get closer to making some decisions on the best segment to focus on. Well, looking at the total column here, out of the 4.67 million that Jones Blair had in sales that year, we divide that number in half. So we have 2.335 million in the urban area and 2.335 million in the rural. Mr. Barrett, on page 7 and 8 of your reading, had indicated that the urban DIYs account for 30% of the revenue for JV. So 30% of 2.335 million is 700,000. That means the urban professional painters account for 70% of that 2.335 million, or 1.635 million. Moving down to the rural DIYers, their revenue accounted for 70% of the overall 2.335 million, or 1.635 million, and the rural professional painters accounted for 30% of the 2.335 million, or 700,000. You notice how it's a little clean here, 70-30, 30-70. It's a little bit too easy of a split. It would be much more exciting if we had different percentages for each row. Now we're ready to start talking market share. And taking it a step further, we can see that in the urban, the 2.335 million is 7% of the total industry sales of 33 million, again for the urban category. And in the rural category, 2.335 million is 10.6% out of the 22 million industry-wide. For Jones Blair, in the urban DIYs, we found that they had $700,000 in revenue out of the $23.1 million. And 700 divided by 23.1 is 3% of the market share. In the urban professional painters category, they had $1.635 million in revenue out of the total $9.9 million. So that tells us it's 16.5%. In the next row, the rural DIYers had $1.635 million in revenue out of $19.8 million, or 8.3% of market share, and the rural professional painters had $700,000 in revenue of the $2.2 million, or 31.8% market share. All right, are we having fun yet? Just say yes. Now let's start looking at which segment are we going to pick? Urban or rural, DIYs, or professional painter? Let's highlight just the market share percentages now. Which one is the highest? Considering the dollar amounts, now what's the highest? What about the cost per customer acquisition? Do you think the rural professional painter is the best? Or is it the worst due to the least amount of income? Who wants Jones Blair paint more, the DIYs or the professional painters? Which market looks better, more enticing, the urban or the rural? Decisions. And as Dr. Miyazaki says, make your decisions based on information versus speculation. In reality, you can make an argument for any one of these four segments. The main idea here is that you don't just make an argument based on a creative idea. You make your argument based on the data. You use that data to support the case of why you're going to pitch which segment. Now, this was really a lot of information to cover, and your head's probably swimming about now, but I really encourage you to take some time to go over this at least 2 or 3 more times and pause the video for each one of the charts, go through, find out where in the PDF the information comes from, then plot out each one of the formulas and calculations. These are percentages and break-evens. They're not difficult formulas, but there are a lot of them. So be sure and take some time to really understand it. And that way, the next time you're sitting in one of those leadership meetings and somebody comes out and says, let's do this, let's do that, where are we going to focus our efforts on, what segment? Now you've got some really wonderful, quick and easy formulas to tabulate the data and give them an intelligent decision and be that go-to marketing leader that you're training to be in this program. And then come back for part 3, where we look at which of the VP recommendations that we think we might go with. Let's see if you were right at the beginning.